Imagine a society composed of 4 individuals where one is a slave of the others. Gauging the happiness of this tiny society, we could imagine that the 3 humans have happiness 100, enjoying their lives as slave owners, and the slave has happiness -10, since he is subject to the whims of the others and is not free to do as he chooses to. Imagine now a society where everybody was free and enjoyed the fruits of their labor equally. Observing the happiness of the people in this society, we could imagine that since everybody has the same duties and they all work to obtain their food, that everyone would have about the same level of utility, say 70. In the scenario just described, the problem lies in the fact that the unequal society has a total of 290 utility, while the one in which everybody was free has a total of 280 utility. So the utility principle seems to indicate we should prefer the option with a slave instead of a more egalitarian society. To reject this counterexample, we will have to take a brief detour and discuss what humans are. What are you? According to our best scientific evidence, it seems that humans are biological creatures that evolved from monkeys, and thus inherited a plethora of characteristics and qualia from their primate ancestors. For instance, humans divide themselves into statuses and roles. Humans play with objects. Humans do and humans tend to cry if they are sad. So it seems like every human has some innate feature that is shared universally with all other humans. In reality, most anthropologists up until the half of the 19th century would have disagreed with this notion, since the prevalent idea at the time was that of cultural relativism. Cultural relativism, in its strongest form, is the idea that all human behaviors, values and beliefs are learned from the social-cultural environment the human being is born into. It is not society that is built around our characteristics, but rather our characteristics that are determined from the society in which we grow. Nowadays, there is more of a consensus that cultural relativism is not as pervasive, and there do indeed exist some innate human characteristics. As cited from the literature, we find the sense of hygiene, prolonged infantile dependency, universality of the incest taboo, and the list goes on. The central point of the first refusal we are going to make is that we state that one of these human universals is the diminishing marginal utility of income. The diminishing marginal utility of income is a phenomenon that has been observed across different human societies. Precisely, it refers to the observation that although there is a positive correlation between income and happiness, that is that, if one has more money at the end of the month, he is happier, as income increases, individuals gain a correspondingly smaller increase in utility. Intuitively, this seems reasonable. If a person who only earns $1,000 a month makes another $400, he will be happier than a person who earns $10,000 and is given an extra $400. If the marginal utility of income is indeed a human universal, then, looking back to our initial example, we notice that it doesn't make sense. Assume we are in an egalitarian society, and we take away an amount of income from one person and we give it to another member of society. That would result in, say, -10 happiness for the person we removed the income from, and an amount of positive happiness for who received the extra income. Since we are assuming that the marginal utility of income is a human universal, the happiness achieved by the person that obtains the extra income must be less than 10. Say it is 8. Then, continuing in this fashion, removing income from one member of society and giving it to the others, we would eventually make one individual a complete slave of the remaining members of society. Yet, it would be impossible to end up with a distribution of happiness as the one represented in the example, since one member lost all of his income, losing 80 happiness in the process, while the other members obtained 90 happiness from sharing the fruits of his labor. And assuming that the marginal utility of income is a human universal, if one member lost 80 happiness by having his income confiscated, the other members can't gain more happiness than 80. So under our assumption, the example could never occur in practice. It does not abide by the physical laws that govern human behavior. Additionally, in empirical investigations, we find that countries that still have some sort of slave labor consistently score below countries without slave labor on happiness indexes, and income inequality has been shown to be a source of unhappiness. The example is thus defeated because of the unfeasibility of its premises. Although there is an ulterior reason why the example is fallacious. The slave does not lose only his income, but also his freedom. This would be an extra cause of suffering in itself, especially considering that there is circumstantial evidence supporting the fact that the concept of fairness is another human universal. Other than the studies on children, where it is observed that children seem to develop a concept of fairness independently of their culture of origin, One of the most compelling clues that indicate that an idea of fairness could be a human universal comes from the capuchin monkeys. In a now notorious experiment, 2 capuchin monkeys were given different rewards for completing the same task. One was given cucumber that capuchin monkeys eat regularly, and the other was given grapes that are considered a capuchin delicatessen. The result was videotaped. Taking for granted that the concept of fairness and the suffering derived from experiencing unfairness is another human universal, the initial example seems even more unrealistic than already discussed. One could concoct many counterexamples that have the same flaw. Let's construct one that enhances the absurdity of not abiding by the laws that regulate how eudaimonia is achieved. Say a person was a bad singer, but singing to people bringed him incredibly high levels of eudaimonia. Then we could think of a situation where the person is performing a 1-hour concert to a crowd of 100 people, obtaining 200 eudaimonia for himself, and -1 happiness for every person in the audience. We are thus producing 100 utility. And this amazing singer would get happier and happier the more people there were to listen to him. So to produce more happiness, we should enlarge his audience to 1,000 people. Then he would achieve 2,000 happiness. That would greatly offset the -1,000 utility experienced by the audience. We have thus increased the happiness produced tenfold. Say the whole world listened to him 6 hours a day. Then the total happiness produced would be enormous. So to maximize happiness, we should all listen to the singer. As one can see, it is easy to produce counterexamples to the utilitarian framework by ignoring reality and the laws that govern human behavior. The one we produced is obviously absurd, while the example of a slave-owner society possessed much more nuance, but fundamentally they made the same type of mistake.